and we are continuing it today. So I'd like to get going on this. We're going to introduce you to a man who, as Janine mentioned, we've been searching for and chasing for a few years, but he's finally decided to join us. And the years of education of our guest have spanned from the beginning, from beginning an 8-year education in a one-room school to becoming a university professor. Ron Olson began his life in 1939 in a farmhouse about 10 miles south of Litchville, North Dakota. He lived there until he left to attend college in 1957. He graduated from high school in LaMoure, North Dakota, earned a bachelor's degree in accounting and a master's degree in accounting and economics from the University of North Dakota, and a PhD in accounting, statistics, and finance from Arizona State University College of Business. So at Arizona State, he taught as a graduate teaching assistant for 2 years in elementary accounting. Then he moved to Denver and taught accounting and income taxes for 3 years at the University of Denver as a full-time professor. Ron has experience in a variety of careers: farmer, rancher, university professor, CPA, and he's been in real estate and most recently, an author. He is married to Peggy Steele. They currently reside in Phoenix, Arizona. So welcome, Ron, to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hi, Rod.
Hello, ladies.
Hello. So, Ron, you were born into a family of immigrants almost 100 years ago. So please tell us a few of your earliest memories in your family.
Well, our family all immigrated from Norway back in either the late 1800s or early 1900s. And early on, I didn't know that much about them, it seemed like, and I've actually become more acquainted with them in recent years and doing some research. And you said I was an author, which is, I'm not sure how accurate that is, but because of writing a book and a half, notice I said half, one's still in process, I've gotten to know a lot about them. Very interesting. They were big families. Each, both my mother's family and father's family, each had 10 children, total of 20 children. And you can imagine how many there are downstream from that. Too many. I can't even keep track of my own family, immediate family. But yeah, there's interesting background, and I've gone back into the history of my family back to 1770, and amazing what you find out in some of those foreign countries. It's a lot easier to get information from relatives back in foreign countries, Norway being one of them, than it is once they come to America. I found I can get detailed information through an interesting source of all the family through the first generation that came to America. When I say first generation, I should say first generation born in America. After that, all the family has splintered. You know, I'm looking for one person. I can't even find her obituary. I know she died in Arizona years ago. So anyway, that's kind of the story in that.
I think it's interesting what you said. After that next generation, the family becomes splintered. That is very true about our society. We, in our generation, I think we were the last ones to maybe have this cohesiveness of family because of maybe perhaps it's our agrarian lifestyle that kept us together. And then we started branching out.
We went to college and then went other
places
and states and countries.
That's true. But one of the things I've found out in my family for a significant number, the work I'm doing now is for my mother's family. And the transportation was so poor back in the 30s and 40s. And a lot of those, not only the boys, but mainly the boys, they would go off to the Northwest Seattle area, become professional fishermen and stuff like that. Well, even when my grandparents died, or passed, they would have to, some of them couldn't make it to the funeral because the transportation was so slow. They didn't arrive until the day later. So what you're saying, Janine, is true, but the lack of transportation, communication,
Sure.
I want to say, you got to understand, I tell people this, I'm lecturing to you ladies, and you know a lot more about things than I do. I'm just a storyteller.
That's good.
He,
Well,
he,
and the transportation system, there from North Dakota to Seattle, there couldn't have been interstate at that time, was
No,
there?
there was a train though. A train.
right, you're right. It was by train. And back in those days, and one thing I've found out as well, I guess this is significant in our conversation, at least I hope it is, in doing some research and talking to family, my sister and I are the only two, and we would be second generation, that are still alive that were born before the World War II. And as you all know, and anybody growing up in America who is in age at all knows, World War II is such a significant event. So we talk about before and after the war.
Mhm.
Now, when we say the war, I'm sure the two of you are the same way. We're really talking about World War II.
Mhm.
But the reason I'm saying that, we lived a lot of this stuff. My sister and I, we've lived through it. We saw it actually as it was before the 50s,
Mhm.
and now we've seen it after the 50s. And we find that family, they don't know. They hear about it, but they haven't lived it. Okay, go on.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to some of those memories. You did live during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl years, and so what do you have any childhood impressions that have stayed with you?
Well, I was born right at the end of it, but what I remember about it was not so much of it, other than what I read about it, like the rest of us. But I do remember some stories about it. And the one thing that sticks in my mind more than anything, everybody, you read about the stories, there was no food, people could, they lost their farms, and lots and lots of farms. I know some of the farms that I purchased later in life. I'd go back on the abstracts, and in the 1930s, the banks had taken over the property. This is shown in the abstracts. So it was really a tough time. But my dad said something which I've never heard anybody else say. And as tough as it was nationwide, and I guess worldwide, actually, but we know more about the nation, and the Dust Bowl was bad, he said something along the line. He says, it wasn't all that bad. Then he well, wait a minute. Then he hesitated, like Garrison Keillor hesitation.
Yeah.
Yes.
No one can hesitate like Garrison Keillor. Not my dad, certainly not. But he kind of hesitated. He said, we had food to eat.
Uh-huh.
And that's the reason he said it wasn't that bad. But, and it was so bad. I know, again, my oldest sister had a breathing problem as a result of the dust and what have you, which I think led to early death, actually.
Sure.
So those are the stories, but stories I know are stories that I heard about him, because I was too young.
You were young.
I was born in the very end of it.
Yes.
Well, how about moving on to World War II era? And maybe a little tractor story.
Well, can do both, probably.
Okay.
The World War II era, of course, and I like to think in fact, I do. I still have a very good memory. I remember clearly some things that happened when I was less than 3 years old. Not too much about World War II. Some of that I do. I remember the hardships. I remember it's almost like food stamps. I don't know what they called them back then. If you're going to buy sugar, you need stamps to buy them, and you could buy. You had enough stamps, you could buy 10 pounds. You got a lot of them, you could buy more. I remember things like that. But probably the big thing about World War II, even when I was young, when all the soldiers, people were going off to war and what have you, my mother's family had six sons, 10 children, 6 sons, and 5 of them all went off to war.
Oh, my.
They all participated, and I'm sitting here looking in my office at a picture of a picture of them, and it's a great family picture. I say family because it's a picture of all the boys. There were 6 boys, and one was too young to go to war. And my grandmother, which would be the mother of the boys and of the people in the picture, wanted one more photo of all her family together, the boys together, because she knew they were all going off to war, and there's no way they'd all come back alive.
And did they?
They did, and I'm writing a book largely about the war and one of the sons in particular. Yes, they all came back alive.
Oh,
Wow, how amazing,
and
Ron.
can you reach that photo right from where you're sitting or not?
Not really, not
Okay.
really. It's I can
We have
see
to,
it, but I have to walk around the room, and I'm not sure how that would
we'll
work.
have to see it in the book.
Were all the brothers in the same branch of the military?
No, the only thing they had in common, probably, other than they were all participating. Now, notice the word I'm using, participating. I can explain that too. The one that's gotten the most notoriety, a lot of notoriety, and that's when I started writing my book about, and it's expanded into a lot of other stuff. He was in the Marines. He joined the Marines in 1940, well before Pearl Harbor, and he didn't get out of the Marines until June of 1946, and the war ended in 45.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when he got shipped. He was getting discharged, becoming in the ship to San Francisco to be discharged from the Army. He drove by, or they sailed by, that little island called Alcatraz.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was a farm kid, had been literally shooting and killing Japanese for years, and thought, I can work there. And he became a guard in the prison system in California, Alcatraz, and then San Quentin for 26 years.
Oh,
A lot of history, and that's all going to be in one of my books.
Yeah,
You ladies got to keep me on track. I will
Okay.
stand here and
We like rabbit holes.
Well, what a relief for your mom, for their mother,
Right.
to have her sons all come home. Wow,
Mhm.
alive.
She was big prayer.
But now, one thing I said I would explain later. They participated in the war.
Yeah.
3 of them were in active military dues. The other 2, there's a little question about that. Most people don't know about this, but in World War II, if you were in certain occupations, farming was one. You're familiar with that. You might be exempt from your essential industry. Another one was fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 of the uncles were professional. I used to call them professional. They were career fishermen in the Pacific, out of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And fell in that category. So they didn't get with boots on the ground. However, they were what they call spotters. Are you familiar with that term in World War II?
No.
Well, people like them who were familiar with the Pacific. It's always the Pacific because this was the Japanese area, and that's where they were. They would spot evidence that the ship has come by, or they were oil slicks, what have you. They knew the oceans extremely well, and they would act as literally spotters and notify the appropriate sources that we saw an oil slick here. It looks like there was a destroyer, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some question as to whether or not they were really military or not, and some were and some weren't. So I don't know for sure. That's why I use the word participate.
Sure.
They were all participants, not necessarily all in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So they were on their own boats when they had this position of a spotter.
Yes.
And binoculars?
Small fishing boats.
Okay. And they have the need for binoculars, or it's just wherever they were fishing is what they had to research?
I'm sure they had binoculars where they're fishing and what have you, but it was just they fished all the way from the northern Pacific all the way south, and they did it for years and years and years. And it's they could see a lot of things that you or I could never see. But that's likewise, if these fishermen came to North Dakota to look at the fields, you and the 2 of you would spot certain things, say, as your background, and they would never see it, but you would notice it. Kind of similar. Does that make sense?
Yes,
definitely. Yep. Well, there's a tractor associated with World War II here.
Well,
or that era.
Well, yeah, that era I think is
okay.
Appropriate. My dad continued to farm with horses. He did not have a tractor. And again, as I grew up, that was it. We farmed with horses. So he was able to order a tractor at that time, which he did. And I'm not sure what year this would be. I think it had to be towards the end of World War II. And I wish I had a specific date for you. And he waited for the letter. We didn't have telephones. The mailman comes one day and brings the letter. Our tractor's in town. This is like 45 or 46 probably. And I remember jumping on my bicycle and going out to the farm with the letter. My dad looked at it, smiled, put it in his pocket, his bib overall pocket. Farmers would recognize what I mean by that.
Yes.
And continued working in the field. That evening, he brings he brings a team of horses in. I suppose 4 horses, 6. I'm not sure the number. Typical fashion, comes in, to the back of the barn and unhitches them, takes care of the horses, feeds them, waters them, everything like that, and comes in. The next day we go get the tractor. And I tell people, and it's very accurate, they say, what's the biggest thing in your life, the most important thing you can remember in your life? That's all. I'm almost 90 years old, so I got a lot of things too that fall in that category. And the biggest event in my life is the day we got a tractor.
Mm.
And this would have been the 40s.
Yeah, 46.
I don't have an exact year, but it would have been the 40s. I was assuming it was around 45, probably. Could have been towards the end of the war, and they started making more tractors.
Right.
Now,
Sure.
a few tractors were available during the war, but very hard to come by. But all of a sudden, we had a tractor, and he brought that team of horses in, put them unhitched them behind the barn, and left that implement there. That implement did not move until I bought the farm from my parents' estate in 1993. So how many years from 45 to 93? I don't know. It's a long time.
Almost 50.
It was still sitting there.
Wow. So he was happy to have it, but never used it.
That's correct. You know, one thing I think is terribly important to add is someplace in here. I guess probably that comment about the Dust Bowl and the recession in the 30s kind of tells a story. And this goes back to my parents and grandparents. My dad and mother never complained. We had enough food to eat.
The way it was.
It wasn't that bad. And this is the same thing. We farmed with horses. Everybody farmed with horses. It's the way it was. Never thought about it.
And how long into your life did he farm with horses? I mean, that you were there?
Until I got the tractor, probably 1945. I'm going to use it. So I'm awfully close, so within a year.
Okay, but then he still farmed with horses, even though he had the tractor.
No. Not really. He didn't for plowing and tilling. No, he didn't do it. But he still used horses for some reason to plant corn. And he would use horses to hay and to rake. Oh my goodness, ladies, I can tell you, I thought my entire childhood there was nothing in the world other than putting Ron Olson out on a hay rake with a team of horses. And that's your job for the summer. I raked all summer long. Oh my goodness. It wasn't as long as I'm telling you, it seemed like it.
So you were sitting behind a team of horses?
Yep.
Okay. So did you get pretty familiar with them, the personalities? Did you, or what was your relationship with these horses? Well,
now you're asking me kind of an emotional story for me.
Oh,
you got to be careful. Yes, I did. It was an old team of horses, little. They were workhorses, but they were not the gentle giants that you see in the Bud Light ads. They were good for bundle. They were bundle team horses for thrashing, which you guys know what that is, and raking and stuff like that. And finally, they got to the point they were getting old, and when one of them finally lay down on the pasture, and my dad used to go out there and get her up, and she'd keep going for another 24 hours. And the hardest thing I ever saw my dad do, he had to go put her down. She was probably 25, 30 years old at the time, and he had to go down, and she was laying down in a straw pile. You know how the thrashing machines used to have the big straw piles. She was down and she couldn't get up. My dad had to take a sledgehammer or some kind of something like that and put her down. It's the hardest thing I saw my dad do.
Oh yeah. So what were their names? These two.
Jenny and Jim.
That sounds like our mothers.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
First, these were Jenny and Jip. Anyway. That's neither here nor there.
Well, it's not surprising that a farmer would develop a wonderful relationship with
Mhm.
the horses who work for them. And I shouldn't say work for them.
With them.
It wasn't just a team of horses. It was a team of horse and people together.
I cannot remember the time in my life when I did not drive horses. In other words,
Mm.
I started driving horses, and I was awfully young, and I was way too young, to about 10, 12 years old, out in the field with them. Today, it would never happen.
No.
Mhm.
But
And
at
so
least
you harnessed them as well? You were able
you
to
could
put
reach.
the harnesses on, or pretty much just drove the team?
No, I did the whole thing. After
Oh,
after
To stand in a box.
after school, we'd come home and clean the barn. My dad would be out in the fields. Not in the wintertime, but when springs worked, what have you.
Mhm.
It was my job to get home from school, get the horses hitched up, clean up the barn, and spread the manure, and
hmm
all kinds
hmm
of stuff like that.
hmm Did you ever have any desire to be an active farmer as you got older?
Uh, you know, Coming through high school and stuff like that, my dad thought an eighth grade education was enough. I didn't even need to go to high school. Certainly
Mm.
not. Certainly not beyond that. It never came up in the conversation. And I think I can honestly say, and it's accurate, that I possibly would have stayed in the farming business, but my dad was not a very good farmer.
Mm.
He was a good person, but when it came
Mhm.
to doing modern things and stuff like that, he was always behind the times, and I just saw no opportunity at all. So I just
Mhm.
couldn't wait to get out of the farms and to get another opportunity, go to college,
Mhm.
etc. And then you've heard this story from other people before. And then when I got old enough, when I had a couple dollars to spare, I couldn't wait to get back into the farming business as an owner, not an operator. So I
Mhm.
did. I ended up buying the family farmer, and we expanded it over the years and what have you.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah, I couldn't wait to get out of it, but then I couldn't wait to get back in, and I still have very fond memories of it. And
Uh-huh.
we worked so hard. Oh, we worked hard.
Well, when you were in high school and you had all these responsibilities at home on the farm, were you able to be involved in any athletics in high school?
We were pretty successful.
Okay.
In fact, our little town was very successful. Not as successful probably as they are today. And we thought we were pretty good at the time, but the truth of the matter is we weren't very good. We were just better than the other ones in the area.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, hey, my wife will tell you more than I will. My family, I'm talking children and grandchildren, are very, very athletic and very athletic. And we probably, maybe a little bit of the genes from my time war carried on. I'm not sure, but yeah, we've got like 10 state championships in athletics in our immediate family. That's a lot.
Wow.
Mhm.
And those are individual titles or team titles?
Both. Yeah,
Okay.
mostly. Yeah, no, there would be, a lot of them are team titles. Like football, we got several in football, several in lacrosse, basketball, track. Yeah, so I guess most of them are team events. You're right.
Mhm.
Track would be the only individual championships, I guess. The rest would all be teams.
And were
Mhm.
these from North Dakota or other areas, other states?
Well, I personally had some in North Dakota. The other ones were Colorado and Arizona.
Mhm. Okay. So back to the tractor story here. Anything more about that?
Not so much. It was just the fact we went from horse and buggy, literally,
Yeah.
to having a tractor. When we get the tractor, and I say horse and buggy, the only car we had as a family at the time was still a Model A Ford.
Oh my.
Remember that tractor came in 1945. We didn't get electricity at the farm until 49. So we
Yeah.
didn't have running water. We didn't have telephone. When I went to college, we did not have running water. We had nothing other than electricity.
Yes. So you must have had a good. How did you even know about UND? And how did you know you wanted to major in what you majored in?
Well, I had a class in high school that I think some business, something or other. And I enjoyed that. I thought, maybe I could do that. And And I started, and I remember one of my first teachers, she said, "Hey, you're good enough in this area. I was not a great student. I was a decent student." She said, "You could be a CPA someday." And in accounting, to be a CPA,
Right.
it's significant to
Yes.
be that, or
Yes.
not to be, whichever the case might be. So I got into it, and the University of North Dakota's always had a very strong accounting department,
Mhm.
and the president of the university, first dean of this business school, later the president, was Tom Clifford. He was just a wonderful mentor to me, and it worked out well. It worked out well. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I'll tell you the most strenuous thing I ever did. You talked about athletics, Janine. Sure,
Mhm.
there was some effort put out for that, and a lot of it, I guess. However, as a senior in high school, excuse me, a senior in college, the last semester you could write the CPA exam, and it's different today than it was then. But we had it. The test was 8 hours on Thursday, 8 hours on Friday, and
Oh.
4 hours Saturday morning,
Oh my.
consecutively. You went home in the evenings and collapsed and went on. But the pressure of that, and I remember so well. After it was all done, a good friend of mine that you ladies might know he was from Bismarck, ended up in Bismarck. We went out to lunch together and talked about it, and we were just totally, totally exhausted. Well, if you pass it, you do well. And it was really a tough. The endurance, not
Mhm.
the knowledge necessary.
Endurance.
The most pressure I've ever been on for 2.5 days. It's 20
Mhm.
straight hours, basically.
Mhm.
Yes. Well, it
Phew.
certainly sorted the wheat from the chaff in taking those tests.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of them never passed it. Even that's true even today, but it's a lot
Mhm.
different.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
When I'm curious to know, because you came from a background that didn't have running water or septic system, and you more recently had electricity, no telephone. What was it like to be? Were you living in a dorm? And what was it like to be living in a housing situation like that with those wonderful amenities?
Well, it was a significant difference, and at the time, again, they just kind of went with the flow. We didn't think too much about it, but I look back on some of the stuff we did or didn't have, uh, and it was up in Grand Forks. It's we all thought Bismarck with the sunny south because the weather up in Grand Forks is a lot colder than it is in Bismarck. I don't know how much colder, but it's tough up there.
Mhm.
And yeah, all the things were. It was fun. It was a good time. It was a good time in my life. I learned a lot. I think, and actually, I think I was pretty well prepared to go to college. One thing I found over the years, and going to a lot of college. Uh, I grew up in a little school for 8 years, one teacher, and we learned a lot in that little school. We were better
Mhm.
prepared. A lot of people think. And I went from there to high school, and I did reasonably well. And I said before, I was not a great student. I was a decent student. I tested well. I could.
Mhm.
That was like a CPA exam. I did well in it, probably
Mhm.
better than my instructors thought I would. But that's okay. I fooled them, and it worked out. And I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this conversation. Help me out. I lost my train of thought.
Okay, the school that you came from, your country school.
Yes.
Where was that? What was the name of it? What did you have? Any unique stories from that time that you'd been in country school?
Yeah, I think that's a great story. And I'm not sure anybody else thinks it is. My wife does, but she's thinks she has to because I'm married to her. But there might be some truth to that. No, I went to an in Gladstone, number one, 10 miles south of Litchfield, and about 14 miles northeast of LaMoure, and it was a country school. We had nothing. We had no water. We had no electricity until 1949, and I was still in school when electricity came, but it took a long time. And we had in 8 years I went to school there. I had 8 different teachers. Never had the same teacher.
Oh,
Never had the same teacher twice. And
Oh.
people often will say to us, "Well, since you went so far in education, college, etc., you must have had some great teachers." Well, I did, but I never had a single teacher more than 1 year.
Hmm.
my
And
goodness.
But
Right.
we learned a lot, and I know I was going to start earlier, and I found out over the years. So I transitioned from that little country school, transitioning to LaMoure high school. We thought a big high school at the time. It was 120 students, probably something like that. And then I went on to college. Actually, I went to Valley City for a little while for a reason I'm not going to get into. I had a good experience there. But then that was less than 1,000 students. Then I went to the University of North Dakota at the time, less than 10,000. Ended up at Arizona State, which at that time was small, 20-some thousand. Now they're 120,000 maybe. But the transition from the little country school all the way up the board to a PhD at Arizona State, I had no trouble. I had no trouble going from one school to the next.
Well, you were gifted, for sure.
Do you give credit to those first 8 years in country school as being the catalyst for what allowed you to move forward and grow in your upper education and even in your professional life?
I think so.
Did it take that closeness of that bonding in the country school and the individual students and families that you had there, along with that those teachers who were dedicated?
They really were. I think the answer, overall would be yes to your question. Oh, these teachers, they were amazing, and a lot of them. And you guys are younger than me, so you wouldn't have seen so much of this probably, but some of these teachers would come out, they'd probably go to a summer school, and then they'd come back and they'd teach in these rural schools.
Yeah.
So a lot of these teachers didn't have much education, but they were devoted. Oh my goodness, were they were devoted. And I really had some good ones. But again, you sit there all day long and you're listening. Your class itself might be 5 minutes for a math class, or on a real good day, you might have a class that lasts 10 minutes in English. But the class time itself was so minimal. However, you were sat in the school, and 10, 15 feet away, 20 feet away from you was the main desk where all the students would be lectured or questioned, whatever the case might be, by these teachers. And so we had a lot. And I got to add one more thing because I think it's important. That little country school, and people will say you must have had a favorite teacher, good teachers, and it was all true. However, typically we'd have about 18 kids in that school, and I don't know that any other little country school like this in America would have a statistic like that. But when I was there as a 7th grader, if you looked at the kids at that school, 3 of them went on to getting PhDs. Myself, have a PhD. Another one went to the University of Iowa, got a PhD, and then my cousin went to I forget where she went. I think it was a school in Nebraska called some other school. But they were all legitimate universities.
Yeah. Yes. That speaks to the wonderful education then in those country schools.
Yeah, and it started there. There's no denying it. It did start there, and it was. There were times, that I thought, "Oh my goodness, could I get out of here and go to the big town, LaMoure, and go to high school?"
Did you?
A lot of it I thought about athletics, not more so much academics, but they both worked out.
Sure. When you went from that country school of 18 students and then into the big high school, a bigger high school, did you ever have any social problems in adapting?
No, I didn't. And I'll tell you one why. And I see this with my own children and grandchildren. I came in and I was, for the times, I was a pretty good athlete. And you come in there and all of a sudden, say, here, you got this big farm kid. He can do this, he can do that. Or, I was well accepted. A lot of it was because of that. I know other kids would come in, they were farm kids like myself and didn't participate in athletics, and they were not accepted as well as I was. And I saw that with I've seen it with my children too.
Yes, I can see where that would make a difference.
Yeah, it is. So is Gladstone the name of a township? Is that how it got that name?
Gladstone?
Yeah, yes. Is that the township name? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And then one of my grandparents went to school with Blackstone Township, obviously next door.
Okay. So you touched a little bit on your author experience, and what was the impetus to write your first book?
Well, so many people, kids will say later in life, man, I wish I would have talked to my dad, my mother about their life and what have you. And I found that category. I never talked to them, had to record it, anything like that. So my oldest daughter, a few years ago, probably 3-4 years ago now, called me one day and said, Dad, if I subscribe to something for you and send maybe a question every week or two, will you respond to it? And it would turn out to be a book from a company called Storyworth. And it's good company, and they work very well, good platform. And so they would send me a question in no particular order. So I answered them in the order I received them from my daughter through that company. Either way, I ended up. And if you look at the book, and I think maybe the two of you did look at it, somebody say, why would you do it in that order? Well, that's the reason why. And I would have done it a little different myself. And I just started writing and found out it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
This is almost all memory stuff, families, and I'd written one on my father, for example. I forget the question. It was second or third chapter probably. And I wrote it, and it's just about my father. And then I talked to a brother up in Cheyenne, or actually in Wyoming. And I said, how much could you write about our father if you had to write the question? He said, well, maybe a paragraph or two. Well, my father, I wrote 20-some pages. And I found it very, very easy. Very, very easy. It's just it rolls. And
Right.
I'm a long way from an author, ladies. You said that. That's being generous.
But I also think, Ron, just from our personal experience, once you get into that frame of mind where you think about, your mind brings those memories back. Whereas if you weren't,
if you don't give it a chance,
that you needed to remember that, probably wouldn't have surfaced.
Yeah, it's kind of my life's memoirs, I guess you could call it. Good friend the other day told me about it. He says, yeah, that's exactly what it was. He said, you did a magnificent job. Of course, I almost say it's great. I looked at it the other day. I did have some help with a lady to help me with punctuation, basically. I got tired of trying to figure out, is it period, quotation marks, or quotation marks first, or I got tired of punctuation. So I hired her mainly to check on grammar and punctuation. I opened the book the other day, just a week. I was going to look up something in it for some reason. And the very first page, there was a punctuation error.
And
it grabbed me, just like looking at a man walking around with white socks and with a tuxedo.
Yeah.
It was so glaring. And I thought,
got it.
Well, first page.
Well, for our listeners and observers, this wrong picture. This is sorry. This is the book.
Yeah.
And I love that barn, Ron.
Isn't it nice? Yeah, my grandfather built that barn in around early 1900s. I'm not sure exactly what year, and it's
other way.
We're all backwards.
Yeah, you're upside down.
Well,
there we go.
I think it's still always going to be upside down. The words, but the pictures is phenomenal.
That's a magnificent barn. If you can't see it, but sitting directly behind me is a painting of that barn. And that's from that photo. My wife had a guy, I forget his name, in Oklahoma, actually do a painting for me. There's right there.
Yes.
A big barn up there. Same one.
Yep. Is that barn still standing?
Barely.
What do you remember about being in that barn?
Oh man, that was a wonderful barn. Even as in many ways, I remember one of the things I remember so clearly was I'm sitting out at the head of artesian well there, and I'm sitting out at the artesian well, and a cousin of mine, Amy Johnson, drove up and said that your brother Dennis had been born that day in the hospital, and I was less than 3 years old. I was like 2 something. I remember stuff like that. I remember, those barns were massive, and the
Mhm.
horses and the cattle had to be pretty much kept inside all winter. And you can't see it from the barn picture itself, but it's in the form of a T. The back part was the top of the T, and it was huge, huge. And that's where all the horses were kept.
Sure.
Mhm.
Well, that was a lot of cleaning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the
well,
front, and the front where the cows were, it was fairly large, but nothing compared to the size of the horses. These were big horses.
Mm.
And the last thing I can really remember about that farm was I was probably a junior, maybe a senior in high school. At that time, my uncle had the farm, and he needed to have some reason they were inoculating his cattle. Didn't have a big herd, but were inoculating the cattle. So myself and I probably my brother went over there to help him inoculate these cattle. We were hours on it.
Mhm.
Kids today would never do this. They wouldn't they do the inoculation, but we worked several hours inoculating this cattle, and it was not necessarily an easy job. And then we had to hurry up and get home at nights because we had to go play a football game that evening.
Mhm.
Now I see the kids. Oh man, they would sit around all day long. They wouldn't do much. Oh, I got a football game tonight. I don't want to hurt my pinky and stuff like that. No, this was just another day in the farm.
Sure, sure. So to kind of wind it up, when you think of the decade of the 1950s, what comes to mind?
More than anything, just how hard we worked. Oh my, we
Okay.
worked so hard, and the
Mhm.
hardest work I ever did was working. I was probably an eighth grader and a ninth grader for 2 years. I ran a bundle team. And you ladies know what that is.
Right.
Yeah.
I had my Jenny and Jim, my two old horses I worked with, had my old bundle team. Oh, it was so hard work. And I'm sure my dad is correct. Being young and dumb and a few other things, I made a lot more work out of it than it needed to be. It could have been done a lot easier.
Oh, but you did this in the heat. Oh,
Well, that's
no, August
how you-
heat.
That's how you learned also.
Heat, mosquitoes, and
Yeah.
and again, you got up in the morning, you had to take care of your horses, get them harnessed, fed, and watered, and then you go out and work for several hours. Bundle team, you come home for lunch, and you got to again feed and water your horses, and then you go have lunch at the neighbor's house or your parents' house, whichever the case might have been. You go back for several more hours. Oh my goodness! By nightfall, when you're 13, 14 years old, it was hard.
You're
It was hard.
dragging. Yeah, you're dragging.
Well, Ron, we are at the end of our chat. It's what a wonderful story you've shared with us.
So many stories.
Yes.
Well,
yes. And
I tell my grandchildren I'm 90 years old almost. So if you want to know a story, Grandpa can tell you a story about an awful lot of things, and not always correct, but I can tell you what I know about him, and that's kind of where we were today. And hope I didn't bore you to tears.
Well, and
No,
that's what you need to do is tell your grandchildren about those stories. And we hope that this 1950s Fun Chat, this link that we will send you of it is the pride and joy of of your grandchildren in days to come.
It'll be a precious memory.
Yes.
And viewers, we thank you very much for joining us. And you see, you can join us and press the blue button and the red button for subscribing and for joining us. So we appreciate it. And you know what? Tell your friends, even your relatives, about this 1950s Fun Chat. So until next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.